What's up, guys? Nick Major here, APTV correspondent, out here on the Vans Warped Tour all summer long. I had a great in-depth chat with Spencer from Ice 9 Kills. Chatted about a lot of stuff like the time he met his favorite filmmaker, Wes Craven, what was different about the writing process in their latest album, Every Trick in the Book, and lots more. So stay tuned to see what all he had to say.
'Cause I've been falling apart in the pouring rain. I'm waging war on myself, a captive casualty.
Who's your favorite filmmaker?
That's a difficult one. I would say if I had to choose, probably Wes Craven, the late, great Wes Craven.
So recent. When did he die? Was it late last year?
He died last summer.
Last summer.
Yeah.
That's right. Man, favorite Krueger movie?
That's a difficult one. I would have to say A New Nightmare, which
Really?
was, in a way, it was really a precursor to Scream and the whole genius behind a movie within a movie, because that particular installment centered around the cast of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and Wes Craven is in it as himself, and Robert Englund is in it as himself, and I just thought the whole concept was really interesting.
I forget, did I see on Instagram that you met Wes Craven?
I did. It was always one of my dreams to have him sign my Ghostface mask. So what happened was I had followed him on Instagram, and I happened to see a post that said he was in Boston at some literature conference. Yeah, like nothing to do really with necessarily horror.
What was he promoting? Do you remember? Was it a book?
I think it was just he was speaking at a book conference about writing thrillers. It was like a panel he was doing, I think, and it was 8:30 at night when I saw this, and it said that he had started his panel at 7:30. So I live about a good 30
an hour into this panel.
Yeah,
apparently.
an hour into this panel. I live about 35 minutes from this convention center in Boston. I'm like, what am I gonna do? I have my Ghostface mask here. This might be my only chance to ever meet Wes Craven. So I was like, screw it, I'm gonna do it. Grabbed the Ghostface mask, drove 85 miles an hour, dodging people, going through stoplights. I show up at the convention center, and like perfect movie timing, like after an event has happened, like they're sweeping up the floor.
The little creepy old man.
Exactly. Sweeping up the floor, the confetti's still there, and I was like, I talked to this guy at a clipboard, so he looked official. I was like,
that's what makes you look official,
right?
right?
Exactly. Clipboard, right? And like an earpiece or something. So it's like,
walkie.
yeah, walkie. I was like, is Wes still here? He was like, you just missed it. He's done. So I'm walking away like a sad little boy with my Scream Ghostface mask in hand. And as I'm walking away, I hear the guy, no, hold on a second. He radios and he said, nope, Wes is still signing. Come with me right now. So he walks me through a bunch of different hallways, downstairs, through the kitchen area, and there Wes is. I guess he had signed like 400 autographs, and I told him the whole story about how I almost,
you went through?
Yeah, the whole ordeal, and how I almost killed a few people to meet him, and he thought it was pretty funny, and I got a picture and got my mask signed. So that's one of my most prized possessions as far as horror
memorabilia.
Yeah.
So had you ever considered going into the I know that you love the music side of this stuff, but I feel like you're a pretty big movie fan of horror stuff. You ever considered, like, growing up, I want to act, or I want to be in horror movies? It
always interested me. I've kind of learned over time doing music videos that acting is actually really difficult. I'm not really that good at it yet, but I love the idea of being behind the scenes, doing our last two videos for the album, Communion to the Cursed and Hell in the Hallways. I really wanted to take a real cinematic turn with them.
Which
and
they have very much.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I wrote a whole sort of narrative that weaves throughout those two videos and connects them with the same characters from one video to the next. So doing that has kind of made me more interested in actually maybe writing a film or taking a stab at writing a screenplay.
So why did you decide to incorporate this whole horror side of everything to your music?
I think that when you're trying to figure out what your art should be, you got to look inside yourself, and for me that's something that horror films and that whole culture has defined me as a person, as strange as that sounds, ever since I was a little kid. And I think my parents always said, oh yeah, he'll grow out of it, and 25 years later,
Mom and Dad
didn't grow out of it. So I think that the best art that you can make comes from what you're passionate about, and that's something that I've always been really interested in. So it was just kind of a natural thing to eventually include that in our art.
Do you prefer to write songs that are kind of based more off of horror stories like that, or like Jekyll and Hyde and stuff like that, or do you prefer to write more personal songs that are about personal events to you?
Well, I think, in the past, before Every Trick in the Book, before the newest album, all of the writing was from either personal experience or experiences of a friend, sort of putting yourself in their shoes and writing from their perspective. And I think with this album, I just wanted to try something different.
Was it fun?
It was a lot of fun. I think that it was a completely different skill set that you had to apply to writing this album because, these are classic stories that we were interpreting, and the last thing that I wanted to do is, have the writers of these stories being rolling over in their grave.
Being like, that was a bad representation.
Right. Some crappy band wrote some song, destroyed my art.
So how do you approach it to make sure you give it the song it deserves?
Well, I over the last few years, seeing so many kids have either our 9 logo tattooed on them or our lyrics, or some reference to the band, I really sort of came up with this idea that every lyric we write has to be tattooable. We don't want any throwaway lines. Every line has to burn. Every line has to mean something. And I think with a lot of those stories, they were written with the same mindset. So,
very memorable wording.
Right, exactly. And I'm a big fan of, double entendres and nuance and metaphors. I was never a big fan of lyrics that are just too straightforward.
So if you were to get a lyric tattooed on you from Every Trick, what lyric do you think would be a good one that you could live with?
My favorite lyric off the new album, there's one track in particular which is based on the story of the Andes survivors. It's called Alive, the story of the Andes.
Fill me in. What's that story?
Basically, what had happened in the 1970s, there was this...
it the soccer team?
Yes,
yes, I know exactly
the soccer team crashed in the Andes, and many people died in the initial crash, but several people, I think maybe 30-ish people, lived through the initial airplane disaster, and no one came for them. No one could find what happened to the plane, and these people were stuck in sub-zero temperatures and without any food, without warm clothing, and they had to find some way to survive.
Lo and behold, a couple dead bodies sitting around.
Exactly. So when their fellow teammates started to perish, the only thing they could do to stay alive was to actually eat.
Donner party it up.
Exactly. Eat their fallen comrades. And I don't know, it's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful movie that came out. It's just called Alive. And I'm not going to sort of give away the ending, but you should really watch it because it's a really inspiring film.
So you wrote a song off this?
We wrote a song about it.
Give me a good line from that song.
And so, obviously they become cannibals. And there's a line that is in the song which is called The Plot Sickens. And it says, 16 souls left in the cold. To be alive's a miracle. It all comes down to flesh and bone. It's hard to swallow the unthinkable. Which, with the double entendre on the last line.
So when you write a song like that, what perspective are you?
I think I have to get right down there in the dirty and be the cannibal.
You're one of the ones eating one of the...
Of course, yeah. Because, that's what you have to do to survive. Yeah, that's what the story is. And it really tests the whole, everything you have to do to survive. And they made it.
Mm-hmm. So did you research these events extensively before writing songs on them, or were some of them things that you weren't too familiar with beforehand, but you just heard of?
I had read all the books at one point in my life, but doing this album, I had to go back and research every little bit because we wanted to be completely true to the literature.
Like you were saying about you didn't want the original authors rolling over.
Right, exactly. So I made sure that all the references were accurate. Anytime a number is mentioned, like 16 survivors, it's got to be right. Mm-hmm. And the lyric process that we have is very interesting. We work with this producer Steve Sobchak, who's basically like a fifth member of the band, and him and I do all the lyrics. So we sit down as a team and this was a really interesting experience because, writing this album, in a way, it was a little bit easier because you knew these stories were compelling to begin with. You knew these were classic stories for a reason, and it was just our job to retell them and sort of put our own
musical
spin
for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So how instrumentally then did these songs come? Was it something you'd initially write the lyrics for? Was it a mix of both, or how did you guys decide what music would best tell which story?
Well, generally when we write songs, I'll have some sort of a melody idea and a chord progression. Then I'll bring it to JD, and we'll work together with our other our bassist Justin, and sort of weave in the verses and the heavy elements. Then once that comes down and that's done, I go over and I just spit vocals on top of it to just placeholder lyrics.
Do you kind of have like the vocal structuring how you want
Right, like the patterns of the screams and the vocal melodies. And then once that's done, I listen to the song and I then put the lyrics to it. So in this particular album, we really wanted to include a very symphonic element. And JD, our guitarist, is heavily influenced by a band called Flesh God Apocalypse. I don't know if you ever heard them. Very, very cool band.
What kind of music are they?
It's like symphonic death metal from Italy.
Ooh, from Italy.
And Francesco Farini is the mastermind behind all the symphonic elements and all the piano. And he actually wrote the orchestration for our song "Me, Myself, and Hyde."
Did you guys and was that the first single you guys dropped off the CD?
That was like the bridge track between the last album and this album.
How did you guys get in touch with him? Did you hit him up to specifically make that, or was it something he had created that you liked?
We were just fans of his work with Flesh God. His orchestrations was incredible, and we gave him the song, and he was so cool because he was so passionate about getting everything right. And he was like, "Oh well, the Jekyll and Hyde story takes place in the Victorian era, so I'm only going to use the instruments
that were around then."
Exactly. So that song came out, and I'll have to play you just the orchestration sometime because it's
that's good to know.
Beautiful.
I love knowing kind of more the history
Yeah.
of how you came out with the orchestra.
And I told was asking what do you want this to sound like, and one of my favorite composers is Danny Elfman. He does
all the Tim Burton films.
All the Tim Burton films.
Oh yeah.
The Batman, Edward Scissorhands, and he was Francesco Farini. Francesco Farini is a big Elfman fan as well, so he was totally down at sort of nailing that. And so that song came out great, and then he sort of took JD from our band under his wing and showed him how to really create a powerful orchestration. And JD got very good at it.
So on the previous albums, what was the orchestra level like on JD's end compared to that?
Prior to Every Trick in the Book, the orchestration had been sort of minimal. JD had done some stuff with synthesizers and pads and some string arrangements, but we knew with the concept of this album being this very grandiose, theatrical piece of art, so to speak, we wanted a heavy-handed orchestration. So JD took it upon himself to basically take classes on Skype with the guy from Flesh God
cool.
Apocalypse, and it added a whole new color to the way we write songs. And JD would listen to the lyrics we'd come up with, and I would explain to him what this book was about, and he really tried to have that influence how the orchestration would turn out, and I think he nailed it.
And so this album, it is pretty conceptual because every song kind of is a particular story. Do you see yourself moving forward, wanting to do a similar thing ever with different stories, or would you see like the next Ink album being more kind of back to just personal stories and emotional stuff?
We're just at the point where we're starting to think about what we want to do. For me personally, after doing an album like this that had such an interesting concept that our fans really gravitated towards, I think doing an album like our older albums where it's just a bunch of unrelated stories would be a little bit crass after this. So
you did like it. You did like it.
I really did like it, and I think that it's hard to stand out in the music industry. There are a lot of bands doing the same thing, and there are a lot of great bands out there, and I feel like we've sort of found our own way with doing something like a concept like this. So I've got some ideas brewing. I definitely think it's important to reinvent yourself, and you don't want to do the same record twice. But
Would you consider every trick in the book kind of a reinvention?
I would
of
say
Iceman?
so. Yeah, I would say that it was the first record that we made that was risky. You
Looking
know,
back on it now, though, is it your absolute favorite?
hands down.
Yeah.
And from what I can tell from a majority of our fan base, I think it's their favorite too, and that's rare because it always seems like whatever record you put out, the fans are
That
like,
gets the first real
Yeah,
attraction from fans.
yeah.
It's hard to top it.
it's hard to top it. But yeah, I think that we this was the first time where we tied in all of our influences, horror, literature.
It's so sick that you were able to bring your love for horror into a CD, by the way.
Thanks, man. And I'm also heavily influenced by musicals. Like Les Miserables and Phantom of the Opera, to me have some of the most beautiful melodies ever written. And for me, I get chills just as much from that stuff as I do from the heaviest breakdown a band could play. So when the album opens with Nature of the Beast, that's right out of Phantom of the Opera, and I wanted it to be like the curtains opening and you're at a theater watching like a Broadway performance. And I actually really want to somehow make an entire play out of this book, much like Green Day did with.
And actually, what I was with American Idiot.
Yeah.
And actually, what I was going to ask you was about kind of what you said. I was going to say, now that there's like this new orchestral talent in the band that you guys didn't have before, and you obviously have experience with writing stuff, you've written the music videos and stuff. Do you ever see yourself in the future working along some of the other guys in the band and trying to put out a musical type thing?
I think it would be absolutely incredible to delve into that world. I just recently saw American Psycho on Broadway.
Oh wow, really?
That's
cool.
Which was amazing. I'm a huge fan of the book. I'm a huge fan of the movie, and I don't know. It was just like the marriage of everything I love coming together in one performance, and it was incredible. Unfortunately, it did not make it. They only got through 80 shows before it was canned.
Oh wow,
but
better than Spider-Man though. Do you remember when Spider-Man was on Broadway?
was that like
It got
20
canned
shows?
so quick, I believe. It was the biggest flop. But so what was the bringing American Psycho to like? Was that pretty accurate on stage versus the movie?
It was incredible. I mean, I think there were a lot of naysayers and a lot of maybe some bad reviews, but there were great reviews of that musical, and I think they brought it to life in an unbelievable way. It's hard to make cheery theater with such a dark subject matter, but I was blown away. The set design was incredible. The lighting was amazing. The lyrics,
It floats smoothly?
yeah. I mean, it sounds like something you come up with if you're drunk or high. Let's make a musical about Jason Voorhees or American Psycho, but they did it, and
They did it well.
they killed it.
Good. They murdered it.
They murdered it.
They American Psychoed it.
you
So
go.
now I got to mention it. We are out at Warped Tour. We're here all summer long. I think in our first interview, we discussed, because it was your first like best, last, worst concerts that you'd been to.
Yes.
I vaguely remember, I think one of them, you talked about your first Warped Tour. What was the first year that you went to Warped Tour?
The first year I went to Warped Tour, I believe, was 2001, and it was an incredible summer because Drive Thru Records had their own stage.
They were at their peak then.
Yes.
Drive Thru was killing it. They were one of the, I don't know, them, Victory. They were
Epitaph,
just
yeah.
huge labels back then.
It was like Drive Thru wasn't just a label; it was like a movement. It's like
The bands on that label were like a way of life.
exactly. I mean, the amount of bands that were on that label that influenced bands to
Here
this
today,
day.
like you, for example.
Yes, Census Fail, Finch, Midtown, Starting Line, Newfound Glory. That label just, whatever it was, they got lightning in a bottle, and they captured and were able to sign so many incredible artists. So they had their own stage that year. So I was parked at that stage for
A majority of the day.
a majority of the day. And I think Less Than Jake was on the tour that year. Real Big Fish
they're
was.
back again. They're back again.
And they're back again, and I think a lot of people, especially newer fans of our band, might be surprised that I'm a big ska punk fan, but I'm out there watching Less Than Jake and Real Big Fish every single day.
Oh, there's the best. Some of the classics. Newfound is out here. Sum 41 is
So
out here.
good.
What was the first year that you played?
First year that we ever played was 2006.
Oh, wow.
And
10 years
10
ago.
years ago was on the
Wow.
Ernie Ball stage, and listen to this. We didn't win the spot. We had submitted for years, and we never won. It was before it was voting. It was just like a panel of artists. So I emailed Brian Ball, and I was like, dude, like we never get chosen. Like, do we just suck? Like,
Were you Ice Nine Kills back then?
we were Ice 9 Kills. Yes, we
Alright,
were. I
cool.
started as Ice 9, then by that time we were Ice 9 Kills.
All right, cool.
So he was like, I really do like your band, and let me see what I can do. And I guess some bands had fallen through for the Massachusetts date, and he put us on the tour. He put us on the show.
That's
one
so
day.
sick.
It was really cool. Unfortunately, we did end up playing at 8:00 at night while Thursday was on the main stage.
Wow, who's Thursday?
Right. But that was at their peak, and we probably played in front of like 50 kids, but
Hey, it was the experience, though.
it was the experience. And the next time we had any flirtation with the tour was 2008. We weren't playing. We followed the entire tour, selling CDs with
so the
iPods.
entire tour. Wow.
We sold 10,000 EPs doing it that summer.
God, that's awesome.
My quota was 100 a day. I wouldn't stop till I hit 100. So I walked around from like 8:00 in the morning till 8:00 at night, hating my life, being sunburned and listening to a bunch of kids be like, your band's not good. Like, that's why you're not playing.
Thank you.
But to this day, I still have kids come up to me being like, I bought the Burning EP at Warped Tour in 2008, and you guys are one of my favorite bands. So that's always nice to hear because it shows me that, that
Some of that
worked.
paid off.
Yeah, that it paid off.
So 2006 was your first one on the Ernie Ball stage. That was also Motionless in White's first one, winning an early ball.
Oh, really?
And
Probably at this venue.
It was. It
That's
was at this venue. I was talking with Chris about that earlier, and you guys, you're kind of doing you're jumping up on stage with those guys this year, and that's something. Did you start that back on the New Year's Day tour with the
Yes.
Motionless New Year's Day?
On the Beyond the Barricade tour.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
With New Year's Day and For Today. It was about a year and a half ago. And I'd always loved that song, Abigail. I remember when it came out, I was like, this is so cool. It's about the area that I'm from. It's about Salem. And I thought it was a great song. And we did the tour with them. And just randomly, a few days into it, he's like, hey, man, would you be interested in singing, screaming Abigail? And I was like, trying to be cool. I was like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, let me check my schedule.
Yeah,
see what
yeah.
I can do.
But, obviously an honor to go up and perform it with those guys. They're very nice, and they were nice enough to bring us out on the
Continue
road.
it through Warped Tour
And
too,
continue
which
it
is
through Warped Tour. And I think that that tour really helped us a lot. A lot of kids come up to us and like, we heard about you on the Motionless tour.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, they're nice guys.
That's sick. So how's Warped been for you this summer? Is when did you last tour on it? Was it 2 years ago?
Yeah, we did Warped 2014, and that was a great summer. A lot of kids, and I think it really helped the band. Kevin's has been very good to this band, and but this year I think it's a whole different thing. We're seeing consistently large crowds.
I've noticed that you guys have been putting on some good sets this
Thanks,
entire
man.
tour.
And it's always cool to see markets improve. For instance, in 2014 we kind of had a rough show in North Carolina. We played kind of late in the day, and by the time we played, there weren't a lot of people left. And a couple days ago we were in North Carolina, and we probably played in front of like 2,000 people.
Nice.
And they were singing the words loud. So it's always nice to see, the progression and the expansion of the band. It really is. It sounds cliche, I guess, but it really is surreal to be up on that stage, and I see myself in kids in the audience out there, or I see myself in kids, that are hustling CDs, and I think it's just kind of a testament to the fact that if you want something bad enough and you work hard enough, it's possible.
Make anything happen.
You can make it happen.
For now, that was a good chat, man.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for
Great.
chatting. Always a pleasure.
Take it easy, my
Yeah,
man.
see you soon, dude. Thank you.
Fellow countrymen, lend me your ears. The following revelations for you skeptics to hear. Very fast we all cry, yet realizing why. Hope to the sinners, death to the people.